Hello, my name is Grayson, and in this video we are going to be taking a look at Palmer's book, The Courage to Teach. And in this we're going to be taking a look at some of the themes that he brings up and also taking a look at some of the ministry applications it's got. So to kick things off, one of my biggest takeaways was the importance of being authentic. With that, I don't have to pretend to be someone I'm not. I can play into and lean into the strengths and the passions that God gave me, and that when I see someone who has a different style, I don't have to look at that and think that because I don't have that style, I'm not fit for it or that I shouldn't be teaching in any way. I think overall, my impressions of the book, I really liked it. I liked the communal aspect that Palmer brings up, and I think we got to experience that firsthand in the classroom. We got to see the subject-centered learning along with that communal learning go hand in hand, and it was really unique to be able to bounce ideas off of each other and get more perspectives from everyone else. Now, for me personally, I don't entirely know yet what area of ministry I'm going into, but I do know that this really helped me answer a lot of questions that I was struggling with beforehand, and that it can help in whatever area of ministry and of teaching that God calls me into. Throughout the first couple of chapters, Palmer puts a large emphasis to really be our authentic selves as we teach. And he portrays this to us by giving us examples like the story of Alan and Eric, where both had similar giftings but a little different personalities, and Alan played into the strengths of his character, coming across as more authentic, and he really enjoyed what he did. But on the other hand, Eric felt a little out of place in his position, but instead of addressing it, he more buried it inside, and he chose to put on more of a facade to fit in. See, instead of Eric addressing the fear and the insecurities he had, he more used them to bully his way into his position, while kind of burying them deep down, not really letting anyone see it. And because of this, Eric found himself in a constant war inside his head. Now, things could have been really different for Eric if he had addressed his fear and stuck to his core self like Alan. So not only does this highlight the role of our identity, but it also shows the importance of overcoming fear. Now, we all face fear, like Palmer talks about, but what matters is what we do with it. See, that fear could look like it could be the fear of vulnerability. It could be the fear of being wrong. It could look like a couple different things. But that brings us to a quote which says, "To reduce our vulnerability, we disconnect from students, from subjects, and even from ourselves. We build a wall between inner truth and outer performance, and we play act the teacher's part." Now, I think this chapter for me, I had some of the similar insecurities to Eric. And I think as I've gone through this book, that it has helped me overcome those. And I'm really already starting to see the fruits of it in the ministry that I'm helping out in. Next up, Palmer talks about having wholeness with paradoxes. So as we make an effort to have wholeness within the paradoxes, we've got to recognize the complexity of our experiences as humans. So we may have some ideas that contradict each other, or we see things in life that seem to contradict. But when we combine these things, instead of running away, we can have some pretty great educational experiences. See, as an example, we can look at the paradoxical need for community and solitude. Now we can ask ourselves, how does that work? They're opposites, yet we still need both as human beings. So at some points, we may need one more than the other at points of life, but that's something that should be embraced because that makes us who we are. Which leads us into the quote from Palmer, which says, "The poles of a paradox are like the poles of a battery. Hold them together and they generate the energy of life. Pull them apart and the current stops flowing." When we see these paradoxes, it's something that should more be embraced both in life and in the classroom because it gets us thinking and it gets us talking. Now, a teacher shouldn't be scared of the tension in the room that can come with this, but rather open to it and foster an environment that is loving, which can lead to some deeper insights and growth. Now, when it comes to ministry, um, a lot of areas of ministry can be a little skeptical to have that tension in the room, but like Palmer says, it's really something that should be embraced, especially when you pair it with the concepts of subject-centered learning along with that communal learning. In chapter 4, Palmer switches gears a little bit and starts to dive into some of the methods of knowing. And one of the most dominant methods is objectivism, which, to break that down a little bit, objectivism invokes an object of knowledge that's out there somewhere, an expert who's trained but doesn't let themselves touch the object, an amateur who needs the expert to obtain pure knowledge, and baffles that only allow flow of knowledge downstream. But on the other hand, Palmer brings in a concept of a community of truth, which, unlike objectivism, allows for flow in multiple directions. Now, this community-based approach has the subject at the center, which really naturally brings us into patterns of communication with those around us. And to go along with this, Palmer highlights that we should have a relationship with the subjects that call us together. In a way, we should have a little bit of a reverence for it and the community. For me, the community aspect and getting to know others and their views is always a highlight of ministry. And I think no matter what area of ministry I go into, the role of community for learning can always have an important impact. This section of Palmer's book is actually one of the sections that I enjoyed going through the most. I found it to be really fruitful, and I felt like I really was able to learn a lot from it. So like we talked about earlier, the concept of subject-centered learning is where the subject is at the middle and everyone is able to interact with both the subject and the others around them. So when we can have more communal focus, it helps create more fruit out of the subject through those relationships and through bouncing ideas off of each other. And then when it comes to the content, we can break this down into two parts. The first part is the information that is being presented, and then the second part of the content is actually the experience itself of sharing in that community. And so as teachers, it can sometimes be difficult to create an open space for content when they want to lead it in a little bit of a more traditional way. But Palmer actually addresses this when he says, "This sense of responsibility cannot be faulted, but the conclusion that we draw from it, that we must sacrifice space in order to cover the field, is based on the false premise that space and stuff are mutually exclusive." And so this shows us that the two formats can coexist and both bear fruit. For me personally, I'm helping lead the youth group at my church, and after learning some more about this, I plan to implement some of these aspects of this as I lead a small group of students. Teaching from a disposition of hope is really a great way that we can sum up one of the main points that Palmer is making throughout the book. Now, while most of the final chapter is about reform, there's pieces of it that we can take away about the teacher's heart. Now, some of what he said at the beginning of the book is kind of reiterated here at the end, and I've got a quote that I think puts that on display pretty powerfully, which says, "These teachers remember the passions that led them to become academics, and they do not want to lose the primal energy of their vocation. They affirm their deep caring for the lives of students, and they do not want to disconnect from the young." So as we teach, we should remember the passion that brought us to it in the first place. And if we come across as authentic and the students can see that the teacher puts care and love into what they do, they might get inspired to do the same. This idea is something that I think can be applied into just about every aspect of ministry. And even though I don't know yet exactly what kind of ministry I personally want to get into, or what I'm called to, I'm confident that this skill can get used regardless. Overall, I think I really enjoyed Palmer's book. I think it really helped me out in some areas that I was struggling with before heading into this class. I'd say it taught me that I don't have to try and be somebody that I'm not when I'm teaching. God made me in a certain way, and I don't have to look at someone else's teaching and think that I'm not good because I don't have that style. I can lean into the passions and the strengths that God gave me to stay authentic. Another thing that I think stuck out to me was the importance of community that Palmer emphasizes. I think he really sheds a new light on communal learning that a lot of school systems are really lacking. Now, I think there are some downsides to the book, like one of the downsides was the wording in some areas. Some of the places of the book were not the easiest to read, and I think that all just came down to the word choice. It just made it a little bit harder to understand. But to close things out, I would really encourage anyone who's listening and anyone who's thinking of going into teaching to ask themselves their reason why and to really dig deep for it, because that reason why is what's going to keep the fire going throughout someone's career. That is all I have. Now, thank you for listening.